Well, yeah, it is that bottleneck work. In the last book of the quartet, which is just under 100,000 words, it's by far the smallest of the books. Uh, it's 64. It's just a series of vignettes that we find out certain things, and other things. I open up some more loopholes. We find out, for example, what happened to Carla Maravelli when she was in Europe for a couple of years, when she was when she between Roger Silver and meeting Paulie. We find out why Manny Cole was writing about this, his past, why he was contracted to do so. We find out lots of little things here or there. Like I said, later on, Elias Walker, I introduced this character in the book, and I did that deliberately. When I introduced the spy Elias Walker, when you read that spy book, you'll see what a great character he is too. I mean, he's a very interesting secondary character here. The whole thing with Prescott Bush and the higher powers and Howard Hughes, that plays out more fully in the spy book. Um, and will again even play out more in the science fiction book that I'm doing as well. Um, but this is a book too that, in a very real sense, is a didactic book. It's not didactic in the moral sense. The book isn't overtly trying to say, you should act in this way ethically or morally or whatnot. But it is a didactic book in that it shows so many different ways, so many different techniques that not only writers could use, but artists can use if they extrapolate from the way I extrapolate from film into fiction. If you took prose fiction, you could extrapolate that into screenplays or into playwriting or into filmmaking in certain ways. So it's a primer.
It's also, I think that it's very hewn to poetry too, because many of the techniques used in it are poetic devices, but are used for the purposes of prose. It shows how you can transition from one art form to the other,
Yeah.
and I mean that only in the sense that these scenes that not necessarily in the dialogue, but many poetic techniques are employed. The book at some point probably employs every literary technique you could think of, and then matches them together for this cinematic technique.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I would still say, because of the length and all the techniques and all of the didactic stuff in the book, I think it's the greatest book ever written. Not just novel, but the greatest book. And I put it against any work of art. I think it's by far the most complex work of art. Having said that, though, having moved on now 2 years and having written 64, then written my Western book, uh, Valley of Red Shadows, and then my spy book, The Super Seven, I think that my writing actually is better in certain ways. That even though this may be the greatest book ever written, and it may be a book that, in terms of greatness, I may not be able to top, it may not. I would argue that parts, if not the whole, of my spy book, for example, is a better written book. So a book can be better in a certain sense, but still not greater, because that book is less than 1/8 as long, and it's not as complex. Jessica said it was a more condensed version of A Norwegian in the Family, even though it only has a few of the similar characters that overlap. It's got a different take on things.